fourth video in this series is going to be wrapping up the installation of the Harrop supercharger kit itself. As I mentioned, there are some other supporting mods that I put on the car while I was doing this. I'm going to be covering those after this because I think there are probably more people who want to see the Harrop kit installed from beginning to end as its own entity than there are interested in watching those other videos that will probably really only apply to people who are going to be tracking the car, which is going to be a minority of people overall. Just to give some advance warning, this video is going to be longer than the others I've done so far. The runtime is close to 40 minutes. That's because it's covering the somewhat involved installation of the intercooler system. There are a lot of steps there that I wanted to cover. And also because I'm throwing in some footage of starting the car initially and some of the initial data logging and tuning process, just to give you guys an idea of what that's like. There is, of course, going to be more coming later on about what it's like to actually drive the car and some comparisons to stock so we can see how much faster it actually is, along with dyno data, which is always interesting to see, but doesn't always tell the whole story. As always, I hope you guys enjoy the video, and if you have any feedback or suggestions, please let me know. Thanks.
All right, so one thing I did slightly out of order here was take apart the fuse box before installing the supercharger, just to make it easier to reach everything. Even so, pulling it apart was a bit of a pain. So this is the side panel that needs to be removed first. It comes out of here. The way you remove it is by simultaneously pushing down on both of these clips and pulling it straight up. So you're probably going to need two separate tools to actuate each of those clips simultaneously. Then this whole front section of the fuse box needs to get lifted up and out. It's held in by 3 clips. Let me get some light over here. Here, here, and here. Getting this guy out was a real bear. So the way I had to do it was press down this clip first while using a pry tool to lift this edge up a little bit. While I was prying up this edge, then I got the middle clip just to get that loose. At that point, I stuck something under here to wedge it a little bit to keep it from sliding back down and re-engaging the clip. Then I disengaged this clip and used another pry tool to pry up this side. Once I had all 3 clips disengaged, I needed to use pry tools on both sides at the same time, just plastic pry tools, and slowly lifted it up bit by bit until it was easy to slide. That's because we're going to need to access these screws here to install the pump relay. All right, and our ground is going to be mounted right here. This is on the passenger side of the car, right next to the head of the engine. This is another 10 millimeter. So with the fuse box side panel, the bolt should go on the inside so that there's adequate clearance. In order to make clearance to run the 2 new wires, I also had to trim here and put a little notch at the bottom. Otherwise, the wires would not fit. Might not be able to see this clearly further out, so I wanted to highlight this.
I edited this video down pretty heavily for the sake of brevity. Removing these brackets isn't too much trouble, but getting them reinstalled with the low temperature radiator in place can be a bit tricky. There's just not much space to work in. Expect your knuckles to get busted up a little bit. If, like me, you're also upgrading the main radiator while you're doing this project, it would make sense to do that now so that you're not stuck removing and reinstalling these brackets twice. Alright, so I realized when I did this initially during the install, the lighting was really too poor to see what was going on when I got the low temp radiator for the intercooler system in. So putting the actual intercooler into place has to be done with both this lower bracket and this upper bracket here removed. These brackets are holding the AC condenser on to the radiator. Once those are removed, you can slide these brackets on the intercooler underneath here and up into there on the right side. What I did then was I loosely attached both bolts on the right side. By right side, I mean driver's side, since I'm facing the front of the car. The top bolt is very difficult to get at. I had to use a low profile 10mm wrench. Once that was done, I reinstalled the two brackets on the passenger side and then bolted the intercooler in. Once again, very, very difficult, especially this top bracket is a real bear to get at. I had to use a low profile 10mm wrench. My ratcheting wrench wouldn't even fit in there. To save yourself a little time and trouble, I would recommend checking for this issue before you try to install the hoses. It's very quick and easy to pull the connectors off to make sure everything looks okay. All right, now I have the hoses into place. Figured out why I was having a hard time. The hoses are paired with each other, and one of each hose in the pair was not trimmed. They're supposed to be trimmed at the factory, and you know, they're made with a bit of extra length. Better too long than too short, and then trimmed down to size. There was about 1.5 inches, 2 inches extra on one hose in each pair. So I just, used a paint pen to mark where they needed to be cut, trimmed off the excess length from each hose, and now I've got these guys routed the way they're supposed to be routed. They're these little cable or hose organizers / separators. One goes up top just beneath this first bend. The other goes down lower near where the cable from the fuse box to the alternator would touch the hoses, just in order to keep them from rubbing. Right, I'm getting ready to mount the pump. There are these adhesive foam strips you need to attach to the pump prior to putting on the bracket. The first one goes on 3 millimeters, which is just a bit over 1/10 of an inch from the edge here. The other goes on 60 millimeters from the edge. 60 millimeters is about 2 1/3 inches. So another minor fitment issue I've run into: the pump bracket is supposed to mount here using an M8 bolt, but the bracket does not perfectly align with the hole. You see, yeah, there we go. The threads are set, I don't know, maybe 1/4 inch too far forwards for the bolt to actually align with the hole. That's a pretty easy fix. I'm just going to grind a little bit off of the edge of the hole until I can get it to fit. Right, one thing to mention prior to grinding, I did block off the entrances to the low temp radiator and the coolant hoses there, because I don't really want to end up with little pieces of steel dust inside the coolant loop. Right, we hit it with some very pretty red spray paint so it matches nicely, just red Rust-Oleum. Give it a couple hours to dry, and then we'll mount the bracket.
Alright, so finally got the trick to filling the intercooler. I have the whole car tilted way forward. The front tires are nearly on the ground and the back is still on jack stands. And with it tilted like this, I can very, very slowly pour coolant into the funnel. As you can see, this whole process is a bit tedious and time consuming. My recommendation would be to do this at a point in time when you can afford to spend, a good few solid hours in one chunk to get it done. And to learn from my mistakes, raise the rear of the car up in the air from the get-go to get everything tilted at an angle where the intercoolers will actually be amenable to filling. Before actually starting, what I'm going to be doing is using the clear flood mode until I see pressure going up on the oil pressure gauge. To do that, push in the clutch and the gas at the same time and hit the start button. All right, do it one more time here. And once more for good measure. Okay, and now we're going to start for real. Running a little rough here. Let's try it again. here. Don't see any leaks. Alright, I'm going to get everything set up for a formal leak test. If, like me, you pulled the injector covers off when you did this to save a few pounds, you're going to notice the ticking coming from the engine at idle is louder than it was before. That's totally fine. The fuel pumps, the injectors on boxer motors are pretty loud. It's normal for there to be loud ticking at idle, which is why all those covers are on there from the factory. Another thing to set your mind at ease, that chirping sound coming from the high pressure fuel pump, also completely and totally normal in these cars. Nothing to be scared of. Just louder than it would be otherwise without the cover over the fuel pump. Feels pretty good. That pulls pretty well. On the supercharger itself, I capped the fitting onto which the PCV would usually attach.